Well, my name is Hal Crossley. Hal Crossley. Most people know me by Hal. My name's Harold. I'm a dentist and taught at the University of Maryland Dental School for 34 years, and I've always been a member of the MSDA and consequently American Dental Association. In fact, I just got a note from the American Dental Association that I am now a lifetime member of the American Dental Association. I'm not certain when the Well-Being Committee began.
Okay.
All I know is that the first person that I came involved in with the Dental Well-Being Committee was a guy by the name of Dr. Philip Nolan, which I'm not sure he's alive now, but Philip Nolan, and he was somebody in recovery, and we would have meetings, a couple times a year. I was at the University of Maryland at the time, and I was teaching substance abuse education, alcoholism, and so on, and he thought it'd be good that I be on the committee, and the reason for it was, at that time I was not a dentist. I had my Ph.D. in pharmacology. I was a pharmacist before then, but I was not a dentist. And he felt that it would be good if we had somebody from the dental school on the committee. That way, if we got any dental students that got in trouble, we could get the dental students into the committee and get taken care of and get treated properly. And so it was his idea. It was his idea to get me involved in the committee. And I think I joined that committee in 1973, 74, during that time. And it was a good idea because there were students who had definitely had drug problems. Not many, maybe one or two. But they were afraid of, that the dean would hear about it, they would get kicked out of school, etc. So I acted sort of as a conduit for, a channel to get these students into treatment through the committee, through this Maryland State Dental Association committee. Then the American Association of Dental Schools felt that every dental school should have a curriculum on substance abuse education, and they provided some money for the dental school to hire someone to teach it. I was already teaching it to a small extent, not much, but this they hired this guy. His name is Mark Arthur, and he developed a curriculum for it, but he never was a member of the committee. Never was a member of the committee, as far as I can recall. But Philip Nolan was the one who really basically spearheaded the committee and keeping it going. We'd have meetings 3 or 4 times a year, and at night, and we would go over the different cases. We never knew the names of these people, of the dentists that were in trouble. All we knew whether was they were going to treatment, they were going to their assigned places, 12-step program, counseling, whatever it was we decided to have them do. And then after that happened, then Phil Nolan sort of, I don't know what happened, because I was in dental school then. I then started dental school, so my time was mostly taken up with being in dental school. But something happened in the evolution of the committee then that Phil Nolan stepped aside, and Omar Jones stepped in. Omar Jones is an endodontist, and he pretty much took over the reins of the committee and kind of streamlined things, and did an excellent job of streamlining it. And then along with Rob White, who was our clinical coordinator, and so that was basically it. We meet 4 times a year, on a regular basis, and we go over different cases. We go over different people that under our guidance, our direction, and we actually get references from several places. It might be a patient who calls up the state board dental examiners and say, I think my dentist is drinking alcohol on the job, or is intoxicated, or something to that effect. It could come from a spouse. A spouse could call up and say, my husband or my wife has got a drug problem and we need some help. But it's not only limited to that. It could be a mental disorder. It could be depression, bipolar, or suicidal, or it could be economic. It could be a situation where they, literally have getting ready to file bankruptcy, and they have no place to turn, and so the Well-Being Committee steps in and says, well, let's see if we can design something for you to help you stay in practice. And nobody in my family is an alcoholic. I'm not in recovery. But from a pharmacology point of view, I was fascinated by the disease we call addiction. And the interesting thing, there was a case where there was a faculty member at the school. Actually, he was a lab tech at school, and he heard about my interest in this area, and he came up to see me one day in my office and said, "I'm an alcoholic. I need some help." And I had just gotten there. I think it was 1973, 74, and he said, "I need some help." And I said to him, his name was Joe, and I said, "Well, I'll tell you what. Whenever you feel the urge to drink, you just call me, okay?" And he said, "Okay, fine." And so he called me on a couple of occasions, and I said, "Don't drink. Please don't drink. It's going to be okay. Tomorrow's going to be another day, whatever." He made things for me. He was just so thankful for me. His wife called me one day and said, "God sent you to us. Joe hasn't had a drink in a long time," etc. And I thought to myself at the time, this is easy. This is easy stuff to do this. And so I was buoyed up by that. I was interested in that until one day he didn't show up for work. And the department chairman called me and said, "I want you to come downstairs." So we went to his office, opened up the C locker. There were probably about 25, 26 bottles of Seagroup 7 empty. And then we opened up his desk, and there was a half bottle of Seagroup 7 in his desk. So I waited for him to come in next day. I sat down, went to his office. I said, "How you been doing?" Okay, he said, "Fine. I haven't been drinking at all." And I said, "Good. That's good. That's good for you." And I said, "Open the desk." He said, "What for?" I said, "Just open the desk." And I said, "If you don't open it, I'll open it." And he opened it, and I saw the bottle, and he pulled the bottle out. I said, "What's this?" "Oh," he said, "that's from the old days when I was drinking. I don't use it anymore." And I was deflated. My ego was deflated. I was let down. I felt betrayed. I felt, and I got so angry that I said, "You know what? I don't want anything to do with you anymore." So I went back to my office in pharmacology, and a few minutes later, he came up sheepishly and said, I'm ready to go into treatment." I said, "Okay, fine." So I arranged for him to go into Church Home Hospital. That night we got there, and he was the type of alcoholic that he didn't really get intoxicated. He just wanted to taste of whiskey every 2 hours. He wanted that taste in his mouth every 2 hours. In fact, I took his whiskey bottle with me that morning up to my office, and I said, "If you want this during the day, you can have it." And so he'd come up almost like clockwork every 2 hours, a shot of whiskey, and then and he wasn't treating patients or anything like that. So he wasn't. I didn't. There was no liability. It's just he was just doing lab work, and for the whole day. So that night, I called a physician friend of mine, and we got him admitted to Church Home Hospital. He was sitting on the edge of the bed, and the 2 hours went by, and he didn't have his drink. And without getting too graphic, he went through a series of reactions. The fact he couldn't have his drink, crying, sobbing, shaking, and so on. And at that time, I thought to myself, this disease is an amazing disease. And that was what really started me getting more involved in substance abuse and trying to help people as well. It's a disease, as you heard me say today, it's for which there's no cure. That's the thing. The most destructive part of the disease is a relapsing disease. And you can go weeks or months without a drink or the drug or whatever you're addicted to, and then one day, just like that, snaps, and you go back to the drug again. As evidenced by the fact that there's some pretty famous people that have been clean or drug-free for years, and then all of a sudden, one day, they die because they go back to the drug. And that's this thing. You never know. It's like always behind. It's a cloud always behind you. It's something always following you around everywhere. And you have to be very careful, what situation you put yourself in, so that you don't relapse. And the changes that occur in the brain from addiction, in some cases, are permanent, and which may be one of the reasons why people have relapse. And so, to me, from a purely pharmacologic point of view, I'm fascinated at the disease by that point of view. But on the other hand, these are my colleagues. These are people that go out and practice every single day. they've got financial problems, they've got mental problems, they've got, drug problems. And even though they're in the medical profession and they're called doctors, it doesn't mean they ain't going to have problems. And anything I can do to facilitate them to get into treatment and to help them, whether it be smoking or alcohol or other drugs or whatever, I want to help them as much as I can, and there's no ulterior motive it's just, we should help each other to get through, because when we all have these problems. They talk about suicide. I mean, suicide, how many people have committed suicide? I mean, maybe you've known people that have committed suicide. And then you say to yourself, how could I have helped that person so they didn't take their life and leave their spouse with 3 kids now? It's just in our nature, to help each other, through these crises. And that's my total motivation. The committee, the well-being committee that we have, as you heard me saying this morning, I go all over the country to lecture. Many states don't have a well-being committee, and which is sad, because dentists have special needs that physicians don't have, and they need committees that are specifically for dentists. I know 5 states right off the bat that don't have a well-being committee for the dentists. If the dentist gets in trouble with drugs, they're lumped in with the physicians. Dentists are by nature a compulsive obsessive, and you know that. I mean, if you had any dental work done, I mean, they are. I always joke and tell them they're anal retentive, compulsive obsessive, controlling, and they're manipulative. Much more obsessive compulsive than a physician is. By nature of the work. We work in fractions of a millimeter, and in most cases, the dentists are perfectionists. And when they can't reach that level of perfection that they feel that they should with that patient, that they're treating, then that gets frustrating. And you go home at night and you think to yourself, I didn't do what I wanted to do today. That patient was unhappy with it. So there's a patient, and also by nature of dentistry, people have anxiety when they come to the dental office. That anxiety is transferred to you as a doctor. You're treating a patient that is not happy to be there. They're very apprehensive. They're very anxious. They're feeling a certain amount of pain in some cases, minor pain. That you get them numbed up, but they're still uncomfortable in many cases. I mean, you put my hands in someone's mouth, that's going to make them uncomfortable. They may not have pain, but certainly they're uncomfortable with me stretching their mouth out, to do the work in there. The mouth is a very intimate part of your body. And so, when you're lying in that chair and you feel so vulnerable, and someone's working in your mouth, So you take all of those feelings you get from your patients that transfer to you, and you take it home at night. And it's easy to say you've got to leave it in the office, but it doesn't work that way. Because if you go home at night, if you're conscientious and obsessive compulsive, you think about how you could have done it better. It's never enough. It's never enough. In your own mind, it's never enough. I could have done this, I could have done that. Or it may be never enough for the patient. You may have put in the most perfect crown, and you think it looks wonderful. And yet the patient says, I'm not happy with it. And you've just struggled with it. Or you have a patient that come in that's got cavities everywhere, and you restore their mouth to perfection, and 6 months later, it's back where it was before. And you think of the amount of effort that you did. So in dentistry, they have different motivations, different consequences than you do as a physician. And then at the same time, you're always treating patients that have other diseases as well. So you have to take those diseases into account. Or diabetic, for instance, or a patient who suffers from chemical dependency. As I mentioned this morning in the lecture, if I have to extract a tooth and somebody's in recovery, I'm reluctant to give them a narcotic to ease that pain. So I have to give them something else that might not be as good as a narcotic, you see. Or, if somebody wants to rinse their mouth with mouthwash and there's alcohol in the mouthwash and they're a recovering alcoholic, they can't do that, you see. So I have to take into account the fact that when I'm treating that patient, not only do I have to pay attention to what I'm doing in the mouth from a dental point of view, but I also have to be cognizant of the fact that maybe that diabetic didn't eat this morning. and they're going to go into diabetic, they're going to go into insulin shock this morning, because when they're stressed, then the body uses up all that sugar, you see, and now all of a sudden they're hypoglycemic in the chair. So I'm thinking of that as I'm working on the patient, as well as trying to focus on doing that crown or that extraction or what else I'm doing. It's a tough thing, The good thing is we don't generally deal in life and death, But the bad thing is that we're always striving for the best, for perfection. And I'm not sure patients can appreciate that. But the Well-Being Committee, I would say the Well-Being Committee, without a doubt, is one of the best, if not the best, Well-Being Committee in the country, as far as taking care of dentists and hygienists' needs. Getting them in, getting them into treatment, getting them back in the office again. What makes it so effective is that we give the dentist the option of voluntarily coming forward. You may have heard me mention today in a lecture, but if I have a problem, if a patient or my spouse or an off staff member reports me to the state board, then the state board gets involved in my licensure. It'll go on my record. Okay, but on the other hand, if I come to you voluntarily and I say to you, I have a narcotic problem, I think I'm addicted to it, and I need some help, then the board may never find out about it. And so the way we have it set up is to, if you volunteer your admission, or you admit that you have a problem, and you come to a well-being committee member, then we can get you into treatment. We'll design a treatment plan for you. We'll get you into treatment, and we'll get you back in the office again. Nobody ever hears about it. And that's the good thing. That encourages people to come forth voluntarily, with a problem. And I don't know of any other, maybe one or two other states that handles it that way. In most states, it's the board refers the dentist or hygienist to the well-being committee to take care of it. But it's amazing how many dentists and hygienists have been helped by well-being committees, both here and across the United States, where they have a well-being committee. I mean, we're in the same boat. You come to me with a problem. I know what problem you're having because I've been there. And on our committee, I think I'm the only non-recovering dentist on our committee. The guys that they have, like Rob White, who's our clinical coordinator, Robert Miller, who's in charge of the committee. I mean, never before has a committee, and Omar Jones did a great job too. But the committee is so well run now. It's like a fine-tuned clock. If I have a report, that John Jones is chemically dependent because he comes into work every day and he's intoxicated, okay, then we can do an interview. We sit down, and you probably may have already had this in a previous interview. Then we'll send John Jones a registered letter, and he comes in to meet before our committee. We'll then say, John Jones, we have evidence here that you have a drug problem, an alcohol problem, or whatever it is, okay? And we want you to be evaluated by an addiction specialist or a psychiatrist, you see. They then go in, and the psychiatrist then makes a diagnosis. And then they send the information back to the committee. And the committee then takes that information and designs a program for them. They have them sign a contract. So I would have you sign a contract and say that you must go through the steps that we've asked you to do. If you don't do it, then I'm going to take the information and give it to the state board. That's that's our club. That's our stick that we use. But on the other hand, you have to understand that the greatest part of the disease is denial. I mean, I have a family member who's had two DUIs, who I'm just waiting for him to get into an accident and hurt himself to maybe force him to go in, because I've talked to that individual so many times about his drinking problem, and he says, I don't have a drinking problem. I say, you do have a drinking problem. You've had 2 DUIs. I mean, if you have 1 DUI, you got a problem. But you've had 2 DUIs, I know for a fact that you've had so many nights of being drunk that you couldn't drive home. Somebody had to drive you home. So you do have a problem. And yet when I see that person socially, they might have 1 beer or 2 beers, because that person is a binge drinker, okay? And they don't drink a lot every day, but when they go to a party or a football game or a baseball game, then they lose control. They lose control, and then that's when they get in trouble, you see. So I've been working on this one particular person for a long, long time. and and I can't get through them. And I have no stick. I can't say to the person, well, I'm going to withdraw. I'm going to withhold money from you because I don't give the person money anyway. I can't say, well, I'm not going to, I'm going to report you to your employer. I can't do that because, the person's not employed half the time anyway. So you see what I'm saying? So each person is going to have their own thing for you to address the issue. It's interesting that in many cases, the main issue, if you withdraw someone's salary or income, they'll sit up and listen, because that's their source of money to buy the alcohol, the drugs, or whatever they're addicted to. But it's a tough disease. It's a tough disease, and if my son or my daughter became chemically dependent, it's an uphill battle. And all these lectures I give all across the country, how many people come up to me, they wait at the end of the seminar lined up to tell me that their son or daughter has a drug problem and they don't know where to turn. And they all want a cheap place. They only want a cheap treatment facility because they've run out of money because they've used all of their family funds, with other treatments for their son or their daughter. And my heart goes out to them because it's not an easy thing. Yeah, there's no doubt that treatment works. We have the Wellbeing Committee has a very good track record for getting hygienists and dentists into treatment and back out again, back in the office again. I would say the success for treatment is probably maybe 45 to 50% success rate. But with the dental profession, the success rate is close to 90 to 95% success rate. So the committee, if we can just get them into the committee, if we can just get them to admit they have a problem or get into treatment somehow, either through a sanction from the state board or whatever, then we can get them back in the office again. I feel confident we can get them back in the office again. There's people out in that audience that I know they're doing well. They're doing very, very well, and they went through treatment. But if they had never gone through treatment, they'd probably be dead today. Yes, the treatment in the dental profession has a very good success rate. Nobody seems to know what it is. They think, well, it may be because they're compulsive obsessive. So whenever they take on a task, they're going to do it to the T. Some theorize that it's because they're more scientifically oriented and they know what's going on. There's no doubt that I had a dread fear of the dentist, growing up. But once I went to dental school and I knew exactly what they were doing, I can go to the dentist with no anxiety whatsoever now. So it may be that they know what's going on in the brain, and so therefore, they know that they can beat it. And some people say it's the income. They don't want to lose the income. There are a lot of theories as to why that is, but I will tell you that dentistry has a great success rate, and anybody on the committee will tell you that. With the thing, we lose one person once in a while. They'll lose one person, but generally they have good success rate for treatment. Yeah, for sure. I'm blessed. I'm blessed with a wonderful life. I've got a great wife. I have a great family. I was a pharmacist for 10 years and went back and got a master's and Ph.D. degree in pharmacology, did research on wound healing and wrote a thesis and got grants. And then in 1974, I was discovered by the Drug Enforcement Administration. I'd gone down to the Fallon Building in Baltimore City because I was going to give a lecture to a sixth grade class on, and she was having career day, and she wanted somebody to come in and tell the difference between a pharmacist and a pharmacologist. And since I was both a pharmacologist and a pharmacist, I talked to these kids. But I went down to the DEA office, and the DEA agent there, said, "I'll give you whatever you need to go talk to these kids if you come back and talk to my agents about the pharmacology of cocaine for about an hour." And say, I can do that, sure. And so I did that, and then 1 hour went to 2 hours, and then Chicago DEA heard about it, and they flew me out to Chicago to train the agents out there. And then Miami DEA heard about it, and I flew down Miami, did that. And then the next call I got was from Quantico, Virginia, a DEA FBI Academy. And they said, how about come work for us and train our agents? But of course, at that same time, in 1974, the dean had asked me to go to dental school. He said, I want you to go to dental school. And I said, I don't want to be a dentist, putting my hand in someone else's mouth. He said, but we need more clinicians with research experience. We have a lot of researchers, but no clinical experience. We had more clinical and so on. So he said, if you go to dental school, we can bring them together. You can bring the curriculum together, bring all these people together. So at 34 years of age, I went and talked to my wife about it, and she said, I think it's a great idea, because she'd have to do it. And so I started dental school in September of 74, but by then, I was going to Quantico on a regular basis, teaching the agents there. So I worked with DEA, well, since 1974, right up until about maybe 3 or 4 years ago. So I've got a great career because I've got my research, I have my law enforcement career, and I have my, not really law enforcement career, but I mean working with law enforcement, and then I have my clinical as well. So how can you say I'm not blessed?